Yo, it is Stocks and Bars, the Stock Market Hip Hop Podcast, the only place you'll find finance mixed with a hip hop. And yo, this week's episode is special because have you ever felt the pressure to need to go back to work immediately after having a baby? Yes, everyone has gone through this. Capitalism versus pregnancy. My guest, Shayla Rahim, she's going to talk about what she is doing to empower women. Let's go. I got my clique ready to use the money they got from jobs and courage and teaching them that it's not so hard. I'm doing this, making investing pop. You law is extra. You tuning in to Stocks and Bars. It is Stocks and Bars, the Stock Market Hip Hop Podcast, the only place you'll find finance mixed with hip hop. And today I have a special guest with me here. So here's the story. The Empower Empire continues to grow. As I told you before in the last episode, in order to grow it, you have to actually do something to grow it. In this case, this worked out fine for me on Instagram. So I had an Instagram post that I saw that was in my feed. And as you all know, I'm a hip hop fan. So the feed that I had featured another Instagram user named Carlton Carvalho. And if I messed that up, my bad. But in that video, he did a rap. And in that rap, he was talking about the very first meal that is given to a woman in a hospital. And it was very good for the fact that he was rapping that. And at the same time, he was also in the hospital, which kind of looked like it was either his lady or if it was his wife or whatever. It looked like it was in the moment that he was actually rapping it, which made it that much more powerful. So I followed him based off of that. And then I reshared the video. So after I reshared the video, then I got a message from my guest here. And she had thanked me for sharing the video and asked if she could be on the show. So this is why she's a superhuman. All right. She is taking on herself the task of helping educate new mothers as well as other women about the very first meal after birth. And because of that, this is why this is superhuman. Because no one, I believe, is taking this as serious as she is. This is why we align, because we believe in the power of self. We believe that you can do anything. And this is no exception whatsoever. She has a free ebook on her page. So I will have that in the show notes. So make sure you check that out and you follow her. And without further ado, I want to introduce my guest to you, Shelly Rahim. What's going on with you, Shelly?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Oh my gosh, what a great introduction. Yes,
No problem.
we can change this world. We just got to have some tools in our back pocket to do so, right?
Yes, that's all it ever takes. I believe anybody can do anything. Sometimes we just need the example set for us. And once we see it, seeing is half the battle, and then we can do it. So thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. Yes, I am so excited to be here.
All right, so I know who you are, but my guests may not. So let's go ahead and kick things off with a very simple question here. So tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, and how you got to where you're at right now.
Okay, so I'm a birth doula, which I'll explain what that means as well. I'm a postpartum doula. I also specialize in helping mothers process their birth story. So I have a background in birth healing from birth trauma, but also just, processing a time in our lives. It's really intense and beautiful. I also am a postpartum chef. So I cook very specialized foods for postpartum mothers. I'm a prenatal yoga teacher and a childbirth educator. So I've been doing birth work for over 17 years, but most importantly, I'm a mother of 3. And I started my journey of motherhood when I was young. I was 19 when I had my first baby back in 1992. And my second baby was born in 1995, so before the internet, really. And then my son was born in 2006, and he's 18.
Okay, so now we know a little bit about you. One thing people don't understand is what is a doula. So give them a quick explanation on what a doula actually is.
Yes. So a doula, there's two different kinds of doulas. There's a birth doula and a postpartum doula. And so a lot of times people will confuse a doula with a midwife.
Okay.
So midwives are still practicing, maybe only about, less than 10% of the births in America are with midwives. Mostly it's OBGYNs. But a midwife will do clinical, like they'll check the baby's heart rate and they can, assist with the birth and things like that. But a doula, what we do is we provide education, emotional support, advocacy, positions for labor. So a birth doula will prepare a family for labor and birth. And then she'll also attend the birth with them from the moment, they call her to come. We stay all the way through the entire labor until the baby is born.
Okay.
Whereas with an OBGYN or a midwife, they might only be there towards the end, right?
Right.
And so we're there with them all the way through, offering support, positions for labor, pain coping practices, like helping her breathe, things like that. And then we also meet them afterwards at their home after the birth for a couple of meetings. And then a postpartum doula is not necessarily there at the birth, although I do go to the births, but you can hire a postpartum doula to come and help you after the birth. So maybe, in my practice, I actually cook for the mothers. I massage them, I bind their bellies. My practice is very unique. In most postpartum doulas in America, mostly come and they kind of help the mother with some household chores. They help her with breastfeeding. They, they offer support to the mother in ways like that. But in the way I do it, I actually like cook. I have meal plans that I feed them very specialized nourishment. I bind their belly, I massage them, and I listen to their birth stories and all those kinds of things. So,
Okay, so there's two types of doulas there, and you're the one who's more intimate with the mother after birth. So how long do you usually stay with them after the fact?
it just depends on the contract. For me, it's either like 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and sometimes I stay with the mom for the first 40 days after birth.
Okay.
There's a very special significance of the 40-day mark when they start to really get a little bit stronger.
So how does somebody find somebody like you? Is it just a simple, hey, Google doula in my neighborhood? Or like how does it happen?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can just do a Google search for a birth doula or postpartum doulas. Yeah, you'll find a lot actually.
Okay. So before we met, I'd never heard of the term doula. I mean, we had a midwife when me and my wife had children. So we were lucky because the midwife that we had was actually somebody that my wife has been involved with for pretty much all of her life. So she used to go to her as a doctor, and then she changed over to be a midwife. And then, small talk as a teenager when you met somebody, hey, I want to be there when you have your kids. Fast forward, she was actually there when she had her kids. So it was pretty cool. Yeah. And on top of that, she was there for all three of our kids. And on the last one, it was like one of the very last children that she helped bring into the world.
Wow.
Like, it's an amazing thing to be a midwife. I was fascinated because like you have to understand how much life you bring into the world as a midwife if you're there for those moments. So I thought it was very, very cool for her to be a midwife for the 30 years that she was and constantly being available to help bring children into the world. That's amazing. That's a lot of strength. One, I can't do it. That's for certain.
Yeah.
So
such an intense job, right?
It is. It is. Does a midwife and a doula work together? Do you have experiences doing that, or is it usually you pick one or the other?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of midwives who do work with doulas and a lot of more women who birth at home. Those home birth midwives really do encourage their clients to hire a birth doula.
Okay.
Because we go there and we'll be there with them during those early phases of labor, which can be a lot slower and longer. And then the midwives will come up maybe during active labor or, when it gets a little bit more intense. So a lot of times midwives do encourage their clients to hire a birth doula as well. So, yeah.
Okay. So that leads into my next question, too. Now, we've been in the American workforce before. So a lot of times we've been conditioned to understand that, water breaks, first thing you need to do is go to the hospital and they'll treat you and do all these things. Now there's starting to be this wave of understanding that you can actually do birth at home. And you just mentioned something about the at-home birth. So do you see a change happening right now with the woman that understands more that she can actually do this at home versus going to the hospital?
Yeah, it's becoming a little bit more common with the internet now and people on social media posting pictures of, giving birth in the comfort of their own home with a midwifery team. So I think it's becoming a little bit more common knowledge that that's an option.
Okay.
But I would say that it's still maybe only 1% of the births in America are at home.
Okay.
There's also freestanding birth centers. So there's midwives who have a birth center that's has all of the clinical things, but it looks like a homey environment. And it's usually kind of close to a hospital. So if they have to transfer, it's really a very short drive. So you have that option as well. And those are a little bit more common.
Okay.
Still maybe, I don't know if this is accurate, but it's probably still only like 2 or 3% give birth in a birth center. But mostly women are still birthing in hospitals. But the good thing is like hospitals oftentimes have midwives there now.
Right. Yeah, we've been through that experience ourselves with my 3 children. All right. So we understand that midwives and doulas can work together. There's somewhat of a change in society of how the women understand what childbirth is. So I have another question for you. What role do you feel that society right now is playing in childbirth?
What role does society play? Let's see. And what do you mean by that exactly?
Okay, so we talked about the workforce, right? Having its impact on women. We've got, 6 weeks of maternity leave? Is it 6 months? I'm sorry. I'm not a woman, but I think it's 6 months. And recently we've started to see now maternity leave actually show up in the workforce. So do you think that's making an impact on what women do for childbirth?
Oh, okay. I see what your question is. Actually, there's no national policy on maternity leave or paternity leave. It's individually state by state.
Okay.
And I do believe that I'm not sure which states have actually required that companies give paid maternity or paternity leave. I'm not sure if it's required. I know that where I'm at, the state of California, it is required that the mother will get her job back after 6 weeks or 8 weeks. They can't fire her. But I'm not sure if they actually get paid for their time off or not, if that's a state law. So there are many states that have no laws, and is no maternity leave. So there are mothers who have to go back to work after 2 weeks because otherwise they will lose their job. So our country has some of the worst maternity and paternity leave standards in the Western world. If you look at any other country, if you go to Canada, they have 18 months of maternity leave. If you go to European countries, most European, especially the Western European countries, all have at least 1 year, and most of the time it's full pay.
That's wild.
So in this country, what we have is mothers that are forced to go back to work far before they're ready and haven't really even established breastfeeding, haven't established attachment bond with their baby, and already having to think about, I need to go back to work. So this is a really big, actually a big problem in maternity care in America.
So what changes do you think need to be made in order to address these issues?
We need federal law that that requires, companies to pay, or the government, can also provide full pay for those mothers to stay home for a year, at least that first year, that they don't have that pressure to have to go back to work, but their income is compensated for.
And this is why we do what we do here, right? Because I believe everything's tied back to finance. No matter what you may do is think that it isn't, it always comes back to money. We are a capitalistic society. And unfortunately, because of that, there are mandates that are influenced by money. And this is one of the things that I think suffers because of that. I also believe that there should be equal maternity, paternity. It shouldn't even be just a male-female thing. It should be, okay, the parents should be able to have time off to bond with their children and do what they need to do. In my example, I didn't have maternity leave. So my wife had our very first child. She was off for her 6 weeks. And I literally had to take vacation in order to help just be around. That was me being considerate. Other than that, if I didn't take the vacation, I was going to have to go to work while she was at home with the baby. And from your dealings with women after they come home from childbirth, you understand they have needs, right? You have to have a village in order to help take care of the baby when the baby is born. So what are a few things that you know need to be done as soon as that child is born?
Yeah. So birth causes injury to the mother's body. Even if it's a really smooth birth, it just by nature of giving birth to your baby, it creates an injury. So the placenta detaches from the womb, leaving a wound inside the womb. So she's bleeding for 6 weeks, or maybe 3 to 4 to 5, 6 weeks. She might have a tear, like when the baby comes out, there might be a little tear in that area in the perineum, or she might have a cesarean where that's a laceration wound through many layers of her body that needs to heal. Her hormones are now fluctuating. The placenta, when it was attached to the uterus for 9 months, it was directing and it was managing all those hormones. And once it's birthed, now her body has to calibrate all the hormones on its own.
Right.
Well, now she's starting to create breast milk. That's a whole nother set of hormones that are coming into play. And so there's a tsunami of hormones that are happening at birth. So right immediately after birth, she is extremely vulnerable physically, but also mentally, emotionally, psychologically. It's the most vulnerable time in a woman's life. And
it's powerful.
Unfortunately, because the focus during prenatal care is all about the baby, keeping the baby healthy, keeping the baby safe. As soon as the baby's out, the focus is still on the baby. Now, okay, the mother can fend for herself, right, really, is kind of how we see it. And let's make sure the baby is doing okay. So there's a lot of checking in on the baby. And is the baby latching? And how is the baby doing? But we've forgotten how to take care of the mothers, how to nurture them and take care of them and nourish them and help them heal emotionally. And so one of those examples is that the video that you were referencing that Carlton created that rap about was, wait a second, my wife just literally ran a triathlon. That's metabolically giving birth is equivalent to running a triathlon. Researchers have shown this.
That's crazy.
And so my husband runs marathons, 26.2 miles. Okay. And when he's done running a marathon, it's like he gets a full body massage. I make him a big meal. He sleeps for 8 hours to recover that night. He gets treated like a king. But birthing mothers are completely neglected. And so not even the nourishment isn't even thought about. A lot of times if a mom gives birth in the middle of the night, like a lot of babies are born at 2 a.m. That's just when they come, right?
Yeah, they do.
And the cafeteria is closed. And she's starving. There's nothing to feed her, right? So we just don't think about these. To me, it just seems like common sense. Like we need to replenish her immediately so she can start the healing process, so she can start producing breast milk, so her brain can settle into this new role of caregiving. All of the neurons in her brain need nourishment. Her hormones need nourishment to come into homeostasis. Her breast milk needs nourishment. Her healing body needs nourishment. But it's really not even an afterthought in the hospitals, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a 100% fact, because our first birth was about 27 hours and it was it was grueling. And I could remember how tired she was. She could barely even push at that point in time. And they would just say, push, push. And I'm not to say that the doctors that we had were terrible at anything, but they just realized how tired she was. So they had to give her another drug just to help close everything so it won't be so open, so it just doesn't happen, right? So I was like, I was just blown away about everything that was happening in that moment. But anyway, I want to continue to tie everything back to finance because I believe everything has that alignment there. So I got another question for you. All right. So birth is often treated as a medical event, right? We understand that. How do you think that capitalism has influenced how birth is medicinalized?
Yeah. So birth is definitely a big business. And it's really focused on a lot of aspects of it are centered around money, not necessarily what's in the best interest of the mother, but what's in the best interest of, perhaps the profits of the hospital or big pharma or, you know, um, so unfortunately, it's not mother-centric or woman-centric. It is really a lot of it is driven by profit industry, by
Yeah.
profit. Mhm.
So what do you think parents can do in order to fight back?
I think educating yourself about your options, you know, um, finding a good, birth doula that can help you understand what your options are so you can advocate for yourself while you're there. There's a lot of things that you can do to, minimize the amount of pharmaceutical medications that are just automatically, you know, standardized, given to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually have some choice and some say. If you know what the benefits and the risks are of those, you can actually choose to say no. And, this might mean that the birth is a little bit longer or, different than what they would expect.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have some autonomy in there. You don't just have to always do everything that they tell you.
So I got a question for you. So, man, what is that long needle that you got to get in your back? What is that called again?
Oh, the epidural.
The epidural. All right. There's a lot of controversy surrounding that. We went through it, and my wife fought vehemently against not having it, right? And eventually she ended up getting it because she was just extremely tired, and they were telling her, hey, it's going to help you. It'll help release whatever it needs to release so the baby would come by faster. And she didn't want to do it. She wanted a natural birth, but she ended up getting it. But just curious on your opinion as a doula, what do you feel about epidurals?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a time and a place for epidurals. I think also like sometimes also when you get to the hospital, they tell you can't eat and drink in labor.
Mm-hmm.
So if a low risk, healthy laboring mother is told she can't eat and drink, then they're making her fast. And so if she's running a marathon and she can't just eat like even a little bit of food to keep her sustained and going, she will not have energy to kind of deal with the contractions. And
Mm-hmm.
her contractions will also start to peter out. That muscle it needs nourishment to keep going, right? So you spoke about how they had to give her medication to get it going again.
Yeah.
So it's the mindset is, it's very disempowering, to be honest. Low risk moms need nourishment. They need easy to digest, quick nourishment, just like a marathon runner has, a little bit of goo or a little bit of
Mm-hmm.
whatever those like things they are that they run, they suck on when they run. We need that to keep going. And sometimes that's just what they need to feel like, okay, I can keep doing this. Um, but yeah, it's exhausting. And then, there is a time and a place for an epidural. So I don't want to say that they're horrible, but it can be helpful when maybe there's a baby that's got a position that's awkward
Mm-hmm.
and it's causing a lot of back labor and the mom's done everything she can to get that baby to rotate and sometimes the epidural can help her to open up and relax and release. It's just that I think people also need to understand that they can do it without an epidural, but it takes a lot of support and
Yes,
a
it
lot
does.
of mental preparation beforehand. Their partners also have to know how to meet them there and to really like breathe with them and move with them and massage them. That's a really key point. And you also have to know how to advocate for yourself in the hospital.
It
When they
takes a
keep on
village.
pushing it and they tell you, oh, you can't eat, then you say, no, I'm going to eat because I'm running a marathon and I have to have a little bit of food. I'm hungry. You just like,
You
you
got to
have to be
stand
a
up for
little bit
yourself.
able to break the rules a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to go to what we originally keep getting back to, right? Is that very first nutritional meal, right? Tell me a little bit more about what you should be eating after you give birth.
Okay. This is a big topic. I'll keep it as concise as I can. But if you look at all non-Western societies, so if you were to go to India, or if you were to go to China or Korea, or even like Nigeria, like African countries, Latin America, Mexico, you talk to the maternal elders there, so the aunties and the grandmas over there, they will tell you that a postpartum mother giving birth compromises her digestive system. And so it's very important that she eats foods that are nutrient dense, they're cooked, homemade, fresh, they're warm, nothing cold. Everything needs to be warm and it needs to be nutrients made with love and like soupy, cooked
Mm-hmm.
vegetables, cooked foods. So no raw salads. We would think salads are healthy, but actually it's really hard on the mother's digestive system to digest raw vegetables. So immediately after birth, she needs and ideally for the first 40 days after birth, the diet should be things like oatmeal, eggs, warm teas, soups and stews. I do a little bit of like lactation muffins as well, but everything warm, soupy, easy to digest, and very, very nutrient dense. So I always do a lot of homemade bone broth. First thing I give a mom is, I mean, when my clients go into labor, I've already either got homemade bone broth in the freezer or I'm making it fresh
Mm-hmm.
while they're in labor. And that bone broth is the fastest way to help her body heal. So things like that.
Okay. Now we've hinted on what you need to eat physically, right? So do you have anything, does a doula also deal with what you have in a diet, whether it's going to be spiritually, mentally, all these things? Does a doula also play in part for what the woman needs after that fact too? Because you got to imagine that you should be submerging yourself in other things as well, like make sure that you kept positive and everything like that. So is there anything else outside of food that you believe a woman should be consuming after birth?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you, because people aren't even thinking about this at all. It's literally just we're in survival mode when it comes to postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Like, not only do they need nourishment to stay physically alive, they need the presence of a wise woman. They need the presence of somebody who knows what it's like to go through such a challenging event, such as birth, and hold them
Hmm.
and like let them just cry. Maybe she's grieving because she didn't want to get the epidural and she has to grieve the idea of the natural birth that she was hoping for her family. And that's okay, but she needs to find her way to self-compassion and love. So somebody like me, who I do consider myself a wise woman. I've been to over 200 births. I've birthed 3 babies. I've survived through challenging times and I can hold her and I can listen to her and I can also celebrate with her, like how
Yes.
strong you were. Oh my God, like even you had a cesarean, you laid your body down and you sacrificed for your family. You are such a warrior woman. Like this is amazing. So they really need people who understand that, who can hold that space for them.
That is it for this week's episode. Make sure that you check out part 2 next week. Did you know what a doula was? I sure didn't. Tag me and let me know what you learned from this show. I got my clique ready to use the money they got from jobs, encouraging, teaching them that it's not so hard. I'm doing this, making investing pop. You law is extra. You tuning in to Stocks and Bars. Stocks and Bars. Stocks and Bars. Stocks and Bars.